Hi, welcome to Ilsley Outdoor. Today, I've got a couple of guests to talk about fishing regulations, specifically what to do if you're a new angler who doesn't know anything about anything, like me. So today I have with me Corey Hart, Vermont Fish and Wildlife Education Specialist, and Dale Whitlock, who is the Senior Game Warden Specialist for Addison County, one of two. And they're going to talk to us about what I'm told is the regulation Bible. So, guys, let's start out with who needs to get a license, and then where do they get one? Jump in, whoever.
Yeah, Dale, if you want to answer that.
Sure. In Vermont, any youth 14 or under does not need a license. 15 and up, they do.
Okay.
And at 15, they do need, it's a reduced cost for a youth fishing license, but unlike a driver's license, anybody who's 15 and up, they do need one instead of 16.
Yep, okay.
That's a common error people make.
Oh, I see. Okay, so 15 and up to get a license. And then where can you get a license?
Fishing licenses are really easy to get, and there's a multitude of kinds too, but a full season annual license is generally what people get.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it online, or you can do it still at agents, sporting goods stores and whatnot, and they actually have terminals on their computers and they'll do it for you.
Oh, cool. That's great. And when you say you get it online, it's at the Vermont Fish and Wildlife website.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been there a couple of times. It's very easy to maneuver, very well. It's easy to navigate, clear where you want to go to get the information.
Yeah, they've done a lot of work on it.
Yeah, it's a great site. I enjoy it.
We also have 2 free fishing days, one in the winter and one in the spring, where the license requirement is waived. So anyone can fish for free on that Saturday.
Oh, I see. That's great. And you said
So there's one for
where
ice fishing and then one for open water fishing.
Excellent. And that's when the fish are down low, because it's still cold out, right? I learned that yesterday. Okay, so if you're 15 or older, you need a license, and it's reduced costs for youth. When does the price go up? What age?
Yeah, once you're 17.
17. So it's reduced cost from 15 to 17, and then at 17 you're an adult, unlike your alcohol laws, and then you need a license after that, and you can get them online or at a sporting goods store. Not at town clerks, though, right? That's not correct.
You could potentially get it at a town's clerk. You know, they used to do that.
I
Town
see.
clerks would provide that, but if anybody that has a terminal or a computer.
Excellent.
You can get it, if you have a smartphone, you can get it right on your smartphone,
Oh, great.
as well as you can have it saved on your phone.
Oh,
So you don't need to print off a copy. You can save it as an image on your phone and that will work.
excellent.
You just have to be able to access it. You
have
can't
to
sit
be
there
able
and buy it right then, but if you have it as a photo and you just pull it up, that will work.
That's great. Now, from conversation before we started, I understand that there are a bunch of different regulations, some specific to general requirements about what you need and what you can use and what you can't use. And then there's also a lot of regulations about lakes, and each lake has its own regs. But let's start out with general requirements. So you said that there's some about rods and sinkers. I'd like to talk about those and anything else you want to make sure everybody knows
So
about.
for starters, all your fishing regulations can be found in your fishing guide and regulations book.
The Bible.
So that can be, you can get it right when you purchase a license from any license dealer. You can get it at sporting goods stores, and you can also find it right online as well. The online version has the ability to actually look up per body of water also.
Excellent.
So with this, I would go, like, let's say I wanted to fish a certain body of water, I'd go and look it up alphabetically.
Mm-hmm.
Online, you can type in the body of water you want to fish and kind of go through it that route. But it's split up into general fishing requirements, which would be things such as like how many rods I'm allowed to fish with, equipment, those type of things. And then we have water body specific stuff as well, which would be the body of water you're going to fish and what those regulations for that are. With the law book, a lot of people, you look at it, it's kind of thick. This is just our fishing regs. It used to be fishing and hunting were together, and then we separated it into 2 books. But it still looks kind of thick, but it's not that complicated. So it's nothing to be scared about. If I was to flip through it right now, there's some stuff in here that isn't regulations. There's some helpful tips on, there's some fish ID stuff. They have some articles that talk about different things in there as well. So it's not all regulations that are in there. But just for starters, if I was to flip through to the general regulations and to make things easier today, do you want to talk about ice fishing at all, or just focus on open water fishing?
Let's start with open water, and then it seems like it's not complicated, but we might have a couple of shows worth of information here. So let's start with open water and see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So with open water fishing, let's just say I want to go out fishing. Well, some couple of things that I need to know is, well, how many rods am I allowed to fish with?
And why
good
would
way to
you-
think of that, you got 2 arms, right?
Right.
You can use 2 rods. With most people, like if I'm fishing on shore, you can only use 1 rod. But to certain types of fishing, you might want more than one. So if I was going fishing for bullhead, and with that style of fishing, I'm going to set the rod on the bank. So then I would be using 2 rods, so you'd be using your maximum.
Why would you limit the number of rods per person? What's the reasoning behind that? Just so that somebody doesn't have an advantage? I don't think that would be right. Is that right?
You're on the right track. So it's to keep everything fair and ethical.
That's very interesting. And I see boats out there with many, many fishing holders. So assumably they're following the regs, and it's more than one person on the boat for all of those different pole holders that I see.
And a lot of times they could have, a lot of those pole holders might just be holding poles. They might not be actually be in
But
the
they're
water.
not fishing
They're just
with them.
they're just storing them for. They can just
Interesting.
grab a rod and go.
Okay.
But let's say there's one person on the boat, they could have 2 rods in the water.
Okay. All right. 2 arms, 2 rods. Okay.
It's kind of an easy way to look at it.
It is an
And then it
easy
changes
way.
a little bit when we start talking ice fishing equipment. You'd be allowed to have more.
Tip-ups.
Yeah, so if we're talking ice fishing, it would be, they classify it as, so I keep saying rods, but it's classified as the number of lines.
Ah, okay.
So on my inland lakes, if I was ice fishing, you're going to be allowed to have 8 lines.
Okay.
Lake Champlain is 15.
15, really?
Yeah,
Per
so
person.
if you were, let's say if I talking my inland lakes, I would be allowed to have, I could fish with 8 tip-ups, or I could fish with 7 tip-ups and a jig rod, however you would like to do it.
I see.
But you're allowed 8.
And what would be the reasoning why ice fishing you get more?
It's different tactics.
I see. Is it harder to catch fish
Well,
when you're ice fishing? So
Depends.
need
I mean,
more chances?
you got everything from the time of year. You've got a lot of lot of different things that are going on in your techniques.
All right. So we've talked about rods. Now sinkers. You told me you cannot use lead sinkers, and we've been talking a lot, you and I, in these episodes about how it's really easy to get going. You don't have to spend a lot of money. But one thing you do need to think about is if you're getting garage sale stuff or if you're using hand-me-round stuff, lead sinkers are a no.
Yeah, so I mean the whole reason we're doing these videos, we're kind of targeting these to people that are just getting started, they want to go out fishing for the first time. And a lot of those people we found, you don't usually spend a lot of money on gear when you first get started. You might have a rod that's been sitting in your attic for years, or you might go to a garage sale and get one. And a lot of times that equipment might have lead sinkers on it. And some states still allow lead sinkers, but up until, I believe it was 2007 is when that law went into effect. And it's sinkers at a ½ ounce or smaller. You can't have lead, so you can use things like tin or other alternatives like that. And the reason for that is waterfowl such as loons, as part of their diet, they'll go down and kind of eat pebbles and things off the bottom, and they were getting lead sinkers, which was giving them lead poisoning.
Well, that's not good. We want to keep the loons healthy. I think they're so beautiful.
Yeah, so because of that, they realized that was happening, and that law went into effect.
So what other regulations, Dale, do you think are really important for new fisher people to know and pay attention to?
Sure. For a novice fisher person, I would say the first thing to do is grab one of these guides and read it. And in the beginning, there's a bunch of general information that's really important. And then depending on where you're going, you should know the body of water that you're going to. And then look it up, and Corey can show you that on the table, but there are many different bodies of water that have different regulations. Even though we're working to simplify that, there's still, especially with streams and rivers, there are many special regulations based upon the fish species found there and the time of year when they're spawning or most vulnerable.
That's interesting.
Yeah, certain regulations like only artificial lures, not hook and worm.
And so we were talking about how you can use the table to look up body specific. Can you look up streams and rivers as well?
Yeah.
Not
Really?
only streams and rivers, but certain portions.
Get out.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
so we'll
really
kind of show you
interesting.
how to do it right now, and they'll put
Yeah.
it up on the screen as we're going through. But if I flip in the book towards the middle to back of it, you'll see I have two sections. So in blue, you have the index of rivers and streams. So if I was fishing a river or a stream, I'd start there. If I was fishing a lake or pond, I'd flip to the purple section, which is the index of lakes and ponds.
Huh.
But here's one thing to keep in mind is not every river and stream or every lake and pond is going to be listed. Because if we listed every lake and pond, every stream in Vermont, we'd have a really thick book.
Yeah.
When you start to talk about some of the smaller ones. So right at the top, it says for lakes, ponds, reservoirs, and impoundments not listed, see Table 2. So that would cover some of my smaller bodies of water, or ones that would just fall under general regulations.
And is
But you
table
always want to
2
check
in the
first.
Bible
So
too?
yeah, it's right in the back.
Okay.
So let's say I wanted to fish. Where do you want to fish, Dale?
Why don't we say Bristol Pond?
Okay, so let's say I wanted to fish Bristol Pond. I'm just going to flip through till I find the bees. So on page 72, we'll see Bristol Pond. And Bristol Pond's actually an easy one because there's no bullet points underneath it. So you see on some of these, you have the pond listed and then there's additional bullet
Oh,
points.
yes, I see.
So with Bristol Pond, what I'm actually looking for is we're following our open or regular fishing regulations. I'm not focusing on ice fishing right now.
Right?
I would just look for where it says table, and for Bristol Pond, it says go to table number 2. And the tables are in the back of the book.
Okay.
If I was fishing, let's say, for example, I was fishing Bourne Pond, which is right above it, you're going to see there's 2 bullet points listed. And for Bourne, it says only open to fishing from second Saturday in April to October 31st. And then use of fish alive or dead as bait is prohibited.
Oh.
So what that is those bullet points, and it says for Bourne, it says table number 3. Those bullet points are going to override stuff that's in that table.
I see.
So in the table, it might mention that you're allowed to fish longer than that. But because this bullet point's right there, that's when the season ends.
Okay.
Everything else in the table would be accurate other than that.
I see.
And we do it that way with the bullet points so that we don't have each lake having its own table,
Exactly.
which would just extend the length of our book.
Okay.
So getting back to Bristol Pond, we'll just flip to table 2, which is in the back,
Excellent.
and that'll give us our regs. And these are, table 2s are general fishing regulations, so those are kind of the standard that you would have. And you'll see I have a lot of different fish species that are listed in here that are not in Bristol Pond. So for example, it says Atlantic salmon. Then it's listed a bunch of other fish species that I know aren't in there, such as lake trout. That reason for that is we have a lot of lakes that are using the same regs.
Right. They're all on. Yep.
Exactly, they're all using the same one.
Yep.
So what are some fish that are in Bristol Pond? I'm actually not familiar with it.
Sure. Northern pike, bass are your big ones.
Yeah, so
Pickerel.
bass is a great one to focus on because our largemouth and smallmouth bass season is broken into 2 categories.
Okay.
So our first season is from December 1st to the Friday before the second Saturday in June. And on that season, it's catch and release only,
Oh, okay.
with artificial lures and flies only. Any idea why we might have a catch and release season
Well,
that
because
ends in June at that particular time? There's a reason for it.
because they're babies.
You're on the right
Fish are
track.
babies.
You're
They're
on-
having babies.
Yes. So typically, up until that weekend in early June, they're starting to spawn. So after that point, hopefully, I mean, depending on how the winter went with ice out and whatnot, it's going to change every year.
Right.
But typically, by that time, they should be off their spawning beds. So when the season opens up to regular fishing, where you're allowed to keep, it says how many am I allowed to keep? It says you're allowed to keep 5, and they got to be 10 inches or larger. So when it opens
Right.
up to that season, which is the second Saturday in June and November 30th, they're already off their spawning beds for the most part.
I see.
If the bass was on its spawning bed, it's extremely easy to catch.
Yeah.
If I was to throw, let's say I tied a pine cone onto my hook and I threw it, where the bass is on its spawning bed. It's probably going to go after that because anything that's in its area, it's trying to protect.
Oh, I see. So it's not that it's
Yeah,
hungry.
they're just really easy
They're
to
being
catch.
protective.
So to make it more fair and ethical,
Yeah.
we have that season just catch and release only.
Well,
And then
that's
once they're
very
off their spawning
interesting.
beds, then it opens back up.
So,
And that's kind of an example of why we have certain regulations as well.
and I'm curious then, Dale. So let's say you go during the catch and release, and you're up at the pond with your boys, and you see somebody keeping the fish. Then what happens?
With my boys, you mean other officers or?
Yeah, you're just up there. You're not on duty, or well, maybe you are on duty, but you're just up there fishing.
Sure. Okay. Well, two issues there. When you're off duty, you have to make a decision whether or not you want to engage,
Yeah.
and that's a whole nother topic. But if I was to answer this as a warden on duty,
Yeah.
so the way I approach my job is very much about intent, and I base many of my decisions on that. And if somebody is intentionally violating, that's a serious offense. And these regulations, what Corey's getting at is their vulnerability.
Right.
And because bass are game fish and they're good eating and they're very fun to catch, and especially in the spring when they're spawning, they are very, very vulnerable.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to make a mistake or over-harvest. And so when somebody does that, the first step is education. After you determine what exactly has happened, and then if a ticket is warranted.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that you are really wanting to make sure that the person didn't get the Bible, as we're calling it, and that's why they're making the mistake. And then you're going to educate them.
There will be a level of education no matter what.
Yeah.
And there may be, in most cases, some disciplinary action involving a ticket and a fine. And if the offense is egregious enough, they will actually lose their privilege to hunt, fish, and trap.
Okay. All right. Well, that seems fair to me.
And you see it run the gambit too. When you see a younger person that obviously is new to this, I'm going to be more lenient.
Yeah.
When you see somebody more mature,
Yeah.
who either does know better or should know better, I'll handle that a little bit differently.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So we're all here to support the new anglers, informing and educating them on what's best. So that's great. Now, what else do we want to talk about with the tables? I'm shocked to learn that you have all of the different lakes and different things listed in there. I mean, rivers and streams. That is surprising to me because that's a big job.
Well, you keep mentioning rivers and streams. So some of them, let's say the Winooski River, for example.
Yeah.
Really big river, right? Or the Otter Creek, where we were yesterday. So those rivers, some of those larger ones are actually split up into sections. Because what I have for fish populations and what's happening with the river is going to be different, maybe 10, 15 miles downstream. So for those, you have it's regulated that way. So, and it'll say, like, from this bridge to this bridge, here are the regulations.
Huh.
And that's where kind of the online tool they have can come in a little bit handy sometimes, where it'll help kind of, well, if I'm on a river, well, what section am I in?
Yeah. Yeah. How do you know where you're at? That's very interesting.
And it'll say right on it too, like what the limits are for that and where that section is. And then you also have maps in the book that kind of show you those sections.
Okay. And what else? What other information can I find out from the book?
You also have a list of all of our warden's phone numbers. So if you ever have any questions, when in doubt, you can give a call. And get that answered. And all of the contact information is right in the back of the book.
Okay, that's
So that
great.
lists off all of our office numbers as well as the warden's home phones.
Great. I've covered all of my checklists here. What else is there is there something you would like people to know about how to get started and how to follow the rules, Dale?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, the pandemic has really brought a lot of people out.
Yeah.
And we're seeing more enjoyment and people out in nature than we've seen in years. And some of that they can track through data by licensed sales and whatnot, but we're seeing it, those of us in the field, just by the numbers of people out there.
Anytime I go for a hike, there's easily 4 times more cars in a parking lot
It's-
than I'm used to seeing.
Yeah, so, that's one of the hidden, perhaps, silver linings of the pandemic is
Yeah.
it's making people social distance and enjoy things in fresh air where they normally may not have.
Right.
Fishing is one of those activities that will get people in tune more with nature, and that's really important, especially in this day and age. And for me, seeing especially younger people out fishing with a parent or a mentor or even on their own, that is something I love to see in a world where it seems like we're getting more and more disconnected. That said, for everybody that goes out and enjoys, whether they're just viewing or in non-consumptive ways and being out there, or in consumptive ways like fishing or hunting, treat the earth and all these things with respect, and do your best to follow these laws and everything that's in the digest. They're there for a reason.
Right.
And it's to protect not only the species but the ecosystem as a whole.
Right.
Don't abuse the planet. Pick up your trash. One of my pet peeves is littering.
It's a really good point. A lot of spots where you see people fishing we have our access areas, but a lot of people in Vermont are very generous to let people fish on their land. You see it all the time on riverbanks where people have to access their private property. If people go down and they keep leaving trash, it's probably going to get posted. So if you're respectful when you pick up your worm containers, if you see other people's trash down there and you pick it up,
Yeah.
then we can keep using that land.
That's great. That's great. So if you are 15 to 17, you get a youth license. Over 17, you get an adult license. You can get them online or at sporting goods shops. You have 2 arms, so you can have 2 rods or 2 lines in the water. Don't use lead sinkers. Check the guide where you're going to go fishing so that you know exactly what the rules are for where you are going, because they are different. And let's talk a little bit, I think we might have touched on this, but let's talk a little bit about why did you guys go through all the effort to map out each body of water and give each one a specific regulation? Why couldn't we just say, in Vermont, this is what you can do? Why do we have to have different regulations for Lake Champlain versus Bombazine or Otter Creek versus Winooski?
That example right there was perfect.
Yeah.
Lake Champlain's huge. It's a very big body of water. There's over, off the top of my head, it's over 80 species of fish that are in Lake Champlain. There's a lot happening there. You have everything from, you have walleye, there's largemouth bass, there's lake trout, there's salmon. There's all these species that are in that lake. Well, Bombazine, there's a lot less species in that lake.
Okay.
We have, for Bomo, there's largemouth bass, there's smallmouth, there's browns. There isn't lake trout, there isn't salmon. There's no walleye. So a lot of our regulations we do have general regulations that cover a lot of bodies of water, but when you have more, such different bodies of water, we have to do different. You have to have a different reg per that body of water.
Right.
That way you can meet what's happening there.
Gotcha.
So is there anything you want to expand on that?
Well, I would say, just to give credit where credit is due, the fisheries people and biologists, this is their life.
Yeah.
And they study, and the mission of the Fish and Wildlife Department is really to preserve or conserve
Yes.
wildlife species, all of them. And without getting so crazy with all the little regulations and the minutia that people can get lost in,
Yeah.
you have to find a balance of creating regulations that people can understand and abide by. You don't want to make it so hard that people are afraid to go out and partake,
Right.
or that violating would be so easy that it wouldn't be enjoyable at that point. So
Right.
there's a balance how do we conserve and protect the species and allow humans to enjoy and have consumptive benefits as well.
It's amazing to me, the more I'm learning about everything that goes into all of these regulations and the management of all the wildlife in our state. I am truly impressed by what we have as resources here. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have we
Thank you.
covered everything? I think we got everything.
Biggest thing, I mean, the biggest takeaway from all this would be either go online or grab a Law Digest and read it.
Yes, read the Bible, you
Look,
guys.
just look through it, look at the information, look up the body of water you want to fish before you go there. Because in certain areas, you can't fish all year round. There's bodies of waters that are closed to fishing during certain times. You need to know that before you go fishing.
That's right.
And then, of course, we didn't really touch on our ice fishing regs at all, but there's other things that we want to go over if we were talking ice fishing, and that can all be found right in here.
Right in there. That sounds great. Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing your time and your expertise, and maybe you'll even see me fishing.
That would be
We hope
great.
so.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Did we go for a half an hour there, James?
Yep.
That was half an hour?
Yeah, I believe so.
Didn't
Perfect.
feel like